Today begins the 2023 lecture series of the Museo ng Kaalamáng Katutubò. Welcome! We are delighted to see you, with the hope that the year has started well for you all. To those who join us for the first time, kamusta po? Today, our series opener is the same scientist who graciously rolled out last year's lecture season, the respected archaeologist Eusebio Dizon. Dr. Dizon will discuss and tell us about the settlement patterns in the Philippines and in some parts of Southeast Asia through a continuum derived from analysis of archaeological data from excavations and explorations. Eusebio Dizon, PhD, worked with the Archaeology Division of the National Museum for 42 years as Curator 1 with a ranking of Scientist 3. He led or participated in the most important digs in Philippine archaeology, bringing to light such significant material and data as Philippine pottery burial complexes, among others. He was the founding director of the then Archaeological Studies program of the University of the Philippines. It is now the School of Archaeological Studies. But more about Dr. Dizon later, as he gets a proper introduction. Meanwhile, for those who have just connected with us, permit us an introduction to and of the Museo ng Kaalamáng Katutubò, MUSCAT, an organization engaged in collecting, studying, and safeguarding material culture, devising cultural education programs, and pursuing museum development, with UNILAB as its main benefactor. I am Corazon Alvina. Kaalamán, knowledge, ancestral and contemporary, is at the core of the mission and vision of the Museo ng Kaalamáng Katutubò, or MUSCAT. MUSCAT is committed to rediscovering, recuperating, celebrating, and preserving Philippine inherited and transmitted kaalaman. MUSCAT's programs and projects are opportunities within which the public can discover, understand, and appreciate the depth and diversity of layers of Filipino kaalaman. Indeed, sharing knowledge is a good part of MUSCAT's work. The remarkable features of Philippine tangible and intangible culture inspire and animate MUSCAT's presentations. A keen custodian of tangible culture, MUSCAT's online programs and publications in print with objects from the collection are conceptualized, mindful of careful research and ethical curatorship, maintaining the integrity of objects within the context particular to their source cultures. To ensure accurate and correct scholarship, MUSCAT engages and collaborates with respected academics and acknowledged subject matter experts. MUSCAT probes for the inspiration or spiritual force behind the creation of culturally significant and aesthetically sound objects. The most exquisite textile, the handsomest weapon, astonishing basketry. MUSCAT is sensitive to the physicality and materiality of the objects themselves, to guide the study of processes and technology, and shepherd the conservation strategy for the well-being of the collection. MUSCAT has also operationalized guidelines for registration and conservation. The bonds between humans and their environment and the balance that must be maintained between them receive the utmost regard from MUSCAT, as do the creative philosophy and aesthetic integrity, the outstanding skills, and the commitment of our artists. MUSCAT acknowledges the diwa, spiritual sense and essence in kaalaman. MUSCAT perseveres to encourage, inspirit, and invigorate pride, admiration, and affection for Kaalamáng Katutubò, as indeed for and in all things Philippine. As promised, we will listen to more information about Dr. Dizon. MUSCAT colleague Raymond Santiago will do that for us. Raymond, please.
Thank you, Ms. Cora, and a pleasant afternoon to everyone. Allow me to introduce our resource speaker. Dr. Eusebio Dizon began his career of 42 years as a researcher at the Anthropology Division of the National Museum after finishing his Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Santo Tomas in 1977. On his third year with the museum, he was awarded a scholarship to pursue a degree of anthropology and archaeology by Ford Foundation. He left the country and took his Master's of Science in Anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania in 1980 to 1983. He then pursued his doctorate in anthropology, major in archaeology, finishing in 1988. His specialization is archaeometallurgy, initially gaining experience from the analysis of iron artifacts for the University Museum. His master's and dissertation research focused on the metal or the Iron Age in the Philippines. To his credit, he established a baseline information about the appearance of metals locally from prehistory. He returned to the country after obtaining his doctorate to resume his work under the newly formed Archaeological Division of the National Museum. His long career has seen numerous participations in various excavations and explorations of significant archaeological sites in the country, both on land and underwater. Among his discoveries were the Maitum anthropomorphic potteries, which were appraised coming from the classic Metal Age in the Philippines. His contributions to evidence of a maritime culture and orientation of the people in Batanes through excavations in Batan, Sabtang, and Ibuhos Islands, as well as providing new dating for the Homo sapiens in the Tabon Cave with a re-evaluation of existing data. On these occasions, he attracted, collaborated, and commanded the respect and cooperation of international luminaries in the field of archaeology. His most current and significant contributions for the country and perhaps the world is Dr. Dizon's recent participation this 2019 in the identification of a new species of early man, the Homo luzonensis, from the late Pleistocene period in the Philippines, together with local archaeologists Arman Mijares and Emil Robles. Dr. Dizon's last post held was the head of the Underwater Archaeological Section of the National Museum's Archaeological Division. He recently retired and has settled in his province in Pampanga. He is also credited as the founding director of the Archaeological Studies Program of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, where he taught for many years apart from lecturing in Ateneo de Manila and his alma mater, Santo Tomas. Our speaker is perhaps the best, if not the most qualified resource person to discuss the topic this afternoon: settlement patterns in archaeology, household systems in Southeast Asia. There will be a question and answer portion at the end of the talk. Please do send your inquiries and feedback on the comments section of our FB page. Please include your name and the organization or geographic location you are from. Now, again, for the second time, and without further ado, I would like to turn over the virtual floor to Dr. Eusebio Bong Dizon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a lecture for Muscat, and I have been invited by Director Corazon Albina to deliver this lecture titled Settlement Pattern in Archaeology, Household Systems in Southeast Asia. And in fact, this is a course I always teach at the University of the Philippines School of Archaeology now for several years. It's probably the only class in the whole Philippines that offer this kind of subject matter in archaeology. And it should have a worldwide view about the settlement patterns in archaeology. But I focus on this lecture in Southeast Asia and some of the other known sites around the world. And so I start this lecture with the Pleistocene and the Paleolithic settlement from about 2 million years ago up to 10,000 years ago. The population was small in family-sized group, hunter-gatherers, and they're very mobile. So they don't have permanent homes except in the cave site located in karstic or limestone formation near rivers. And cave sites were mainly the more permanent settlement because cannot move anymore these caves. These caves often are close to each other, and the prehistoric people occupy a number of these caves at the same time. And they settle in one of the best caves that they select. And through the years, they occupy this as their settlement. There are also open sites located in rainforest and open savanna environment. And near river and lakes could have temporary campsites and build lean-to or to shelter themselves. But these are very, very temporary, very difficult to find. Present time, changing environment would be a factor not to find these settlements, these old settlements. And the shifting river course through time, geologically, also would erase some of these settlements through time, except if they were noted and explored archaeologically. Some of the caves themselves collapse, and so difficult to find them. There are also dried up lakes that are to be considered where settlement of these prehistoric peoples can be found. Uh, we can look at the global dispersals and colonizations of tool makers, which is the pre-modern humans from out of Africa, the first colonization in Eurasia. And here you can see, for example, they went to Obadiah and Dimanisi in Georgia, and then in uh, Israel and Asia. And later on, the anatomically modern humans, they were, you can see here the dispersal routes and going through Southeast Asia, China and Southeast Asia. So these are the possible locations of the Pleistocene human settlement around the world. And here, focusing from China to Indonesia, Southeast Asia, you can see the dispersal of Homo erectus, Homo species, archaic Homo sapiens, and then Homo sapiens, including southern Australia through time. One of the best documented little human population is the Homo floresiensis, and he lived also in a cave in Flores, in the island of Indonesia, and one of the best excavated with a number of individuals, and then reconstructed figure of about a meter in size, and an adult one. And the environment he occupied was forest and also a karstic formation. We can see here, for example, also the if you lower the sea level to 100 meters, you can see the exposed Sunda shelves between mainland Southeast Asia to Indonesia. But for the Philippines itself, it is possible that there were land bridges between Indonesia and Palawan. It's possible, but and then between Indonesia and southern Mindanao, where these Homo erectus or early Homos may have passed through, and it is difficult to say that there were also land bridges between China, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Between China and Taiwan, yes, there were land bridges, but between Taiwan and the Philippines, no. It has been proven through bathymetric research that there were no land bridges between Taiwan and the Philippines. Here are the Paleolithic sites in the Philippines that we have documented at the moment in Cagayan Valley, in Peña Blanca, in Arubo. This is in Nueva Ecija, Novaliches, Cabarjuan. This is Pangasinan. And then, of course, in Huluga, in northern Mindanao. And of course, our very own Tabon Cave and Ili Cave in the island of Palawan. So here you can see the settlements along the river on the right side of this lecture. It is a karstic formation, the same way the karstic formation of Tabon Cave, located here, is in a similar situation. Only that in Cagayan Valley, it's the river, it's the Pinakanawan River, whereas in Palawan, it's uh, the Sunda Shelf and the beach area of the in Lipuon Point and then in El Nido. So during the Pleistocene, this is a land exposed, in fact, that about 30 kilometers away from the seashore where Tabon Cave is located. So this has been like in the changing environment between Pleistocene and Holocene period. So here are the distribution of Paleolithic sites in the Philippines, where megafauna like elephas, stegodon, rhinoceros, giant turtle were found. Cagayan Valley, Anda, Pangasinan, Antipolo, Cabanatuan, Iloilo, and then in Agusan Valley in Mindanao. Here's the landscape of Paleolithic or the Pleistocene site in Cagayan Valley. And this is, of course, a result of the upliftment or folding between Sierra Madre and the Cordillera. And here is Stegodon teeth and elephas. You can imagine, for example, in Antipolo, Quezon City, and Green Hills, this is the same kind of environment that one should expect. Only now you see it's full of people, development of cities, lots of buildings, and so you cannot see anymore this kind of landscape where prehistoric populations may have roamed around following these megafauna, which are now fossilized. But we can still find evidences of the fossil elephas, stegodon, around Diliman area, Antipolo, Guadalupe, Bulacan. So in our reconstruction during the Pleistocene period, it was like this kind of environment. And here is also the landscape in Espinosa Ranch, Cagayan Valley, and now part of the Kalinga. And you can see here my colleague Angel Bautista and Francois Sema doing the exploration of a stegodon. And we found here Paleolithic cobble tool and also bone tool, bone fragment, fossilized fragment, and which are evidence of settlement in this open savanna environment, which probably there were also dried up lakes because the animals need water. And so these are being followed by humans or early humans, like Homo erectus, in this area. So the settlement here may have been linto and very sparse very difficult to locate unless we found a kill site. And this is the kill site that was discovered or excavated by Dr. Thomas Iñigo, another French colleague, in Kalinga area and was published in the Nature. And it's dated about 709,000 years ago. And it's composed of stone tools and rhinoceros, which may have been butchered in this area of Kalinga, formerly called part of the Cagayan Valley, Kalinga Apayao. So here is the reconstructed geological formation, folding in their excavation trends in Cagayan Valley and a long stratigraphy, which prove the antiquity of these animal and stone tools in this area. So very, very difficult to find and very, very limited. One of a kind, in fact, sometimes in this area. Perhaps in the Cubao area, Novaliches, there were also some of these. Unfortunately, because of development activities, we cannot find any more this kind of Paleolithic sites in Metro Manila area, in the Rizal province. Here is the relief map between Sunda shelves and Sahul shelves. And you can see here that is Taiwan. So that is the land bridge between mainland China and Taiwan, where elephants or megafauna can cross. But between Taiwan and the Philippines, it's a deep trench. So it is not possible to cross. However, between Borneo and Palawan, it is still possible to have land bridge. And also here in the western Mindanao and here in the southern Mindanao, this is the Sarangani Island, Balut Island, and Sangire, the last island where the elephants was found in Indonesia. Of course, Flores is somewhere around here. Then Australia, it's a big landmass. Here is an example of the pygmy stegodon that are normally found in the Philippines from around 400,000 years ago. This is in the Senckenberg Museum, and these specimens were taken from Greece area. They are very small elephants. They are only as big as pigs. So, but they are adult because you can see now here the ivory tusk. This is a mastodon, which may not be present in the Philippines. So these are located in the Senckenberg Museum in this area in Germany, Frankfurt. Elephants can swim. They have snorkels, and so they can move long distance in seawater. They can go one on top of the other and swim, and they are being followed by other animals. So if you have a strong current, it's very easy for them to cross one island after the other. For example, they were also observed swimming between India and Sri Lanka. That's a distance of about 30 kilometers. And pigs can swim also. You can see in the island of Mindanao and any other island in the Philippines, there are wild pigs, and no way that they can cross between land bridges, but only they swim. They also paddle one after the other, and they have a snout that's like the elephant. They can breathe while in the water. So many other animals, monkeys. So this is the animal behavior, and they can travel a long distance. Tiger, for example, tiger is also present in Palawan, and they are good swimmers. Deer, there are many deers found in the Philippines, in many islands. And one of those datable materials were the tektite found in Cagayan, and they're about 800,000 years ago. They are not only found in Cagayan, they were also found in Bulacan, in in Cubao, in Novaliches, in Green Hills. That's why you have tektite towers in Green Hills because of the presence. The tektite shower came around 1 million to 800,000 years ago in Australasia, China, including Australia and mainland Southeast Asia, and of course, island Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and Indonesia. So they are good datable materials to show the Paleolithic and Pleistocene settlement of people. So another example of the landscape, this is in Spinoceras, Rhinoceros, and we have a number of the European students doing fieldwork activities in this area before the Kalinga rhinoceros was found. And so we tested a number of this area. This area was in fact known in the 1930s and then worked again in the 50s by H. Oatley Bayer, and then later on by Robert Fox in the 1970s. So we worked here between 1980s and then again in 2000. So this is Kalau cave, Transwasema, and this is the Homo lusinensis, another species of human found by Dr. Armand Mijares and then Florent de Troyes. And it's a different kind of species. It's not Homo sapiens, it's not Homo erectus, and it's just like Homo floresiensis. It's another hominin. So it was published in the Journal of Human Evolution, and it shows the antiquity of human in the Philippine discovery of Homo lusinensis, and many institutions were involved in contributing research funds for this. So here's the team that we have, very international, Europeans, Americans, and Filipinos, mainly students from the archaeological studies program before and now School of Archaeology at the University of the Philippines. So here's the stratigraphy. Well, in fact, this Homo lusinensis may have stayed outside the cave, and the fossil just got into the cave. So we did not have really good evidences of the habitation of this particular individual. But here is the cave where it was dug to about 3 meters by Armand Mijares, by Mandy, who wanted to dig deeper and deeper, because normally before the National Museum, they only dig about 2 meters. So he broke that tradition and went down and finally found this individual, this fossil. So here are some of the fossilized fragments of this Homo lusinensis. Not only one, but there are many, including the teeth. And it was published in a cover of Nature in April 11, and it's a big find for Southeast Asia and the world, where a new species of Homo was found in the Pleistocene of the Philippines. So we were put in a map as an island where human evolution has been very active. So here are the implications. The discovery adds a new member to the genus Homo and makes Southeast Asia an important evolutionary region. It also raised more questions, such as Homo lusinensis lineage, how and when it reached Luzon Island. The discovery situates the Philippines as a major area in human evolutionary research. This discovery can be quite controversial, with lively and robust debates on the identification of new Homo species and speciation, including sampling issue. Aside from the evidence of fossils and stone tools. There are also rock parts found in Peña Blanca, but they are not quite studied yet, and the dating may have been only about 4,000 years or 2,000 years ago. But certainly, they represent human activities and human settlement in this area. So here are some of the data notation from our colleague. This is the late Clyde Hagon. He's a very good student and then a researcher of the National Museum. And then in Gua Balambangan in Indonesia, we have similar and also in karstic formation, but these are quite early, from about 16,000 to 10,000 BC. So we have a publication of these re-examining pictograms in the caves of Cagayan Valley. And then the Arubohan axe is middle or lower middle Paleolithic record in the Philippines. It's an hand axe. There are very few hand axes found in the Philippines and island Southeast Asia. Most of them found in China and of course, Indonesia. And this is in Cagayan de Oro, northern Mindanao, and a number of the early students of the archaeological studies program. And here we found also some evidence of hand axes. Lipuon Point, Palawan, this is the Tabon Cave, and then another karstic formation, originally excavated by Dr. Robert Fox in the 1960s, and showed evidence of the early Homo sapiens. He dated it to 23,000 years ago, 24,000 years ago. And aside from the rich materials, it was poorly documented. And there are a number of human remains found, and also evidence of Neolithic and Metal Age, where the cave has been used from habitation to a burial site in the Neolithic and Metal Age. But of course, it was occupied heavily as a settlement where people may have produced some of these artifacts inside the cave. They were manufactured. And here in about 1999, 2000, researchers from the National Museum re-excavated part of the Tabon Cave and found 11 new human fossils. Here's the inside of the Tabon Cave. It's a very rich cave, a very nice cave. That's why people keep coming back and staying inside this cave. It's very airy and dry, and so people may have lived in this area because we find evidence of flaking and debitage. Here we have our French colleague, Florent Detroit, and then Xavier, and then a number of students before who use some of these materials for their dissertation. That's why Tabon Cave has been very important and well documented for this period. And here, of course, this is the map, and this is the activity area. The frontal bone here was found by Robert Fox, and now it has a new date from the stratigraphy of Robert Fox. He came from about 8,500 years ago to 45,000 years. This is still correct, but the details may not be that proper anymore because of the new information that were taken and analyzed in Tabon Cave. And for example, the stratigraphy now, the synthetic stratigraphy, we have about 19 layers, where in fact Fox has only 4 layers documented, because now we have Pleistocene geologists like Xavier, who were able to work on this detailed recording of the different layers inside Tabon Cave, which also provided new dates like this one, the frontal is now 16,500, and the right mandible is 31,000, and the tibia is 47,000. So Fox is still right with his dates. And what this research suggests is that a number of human population have occupied Tabon caves for several thousand years ago, one after the other. One may not be related to each other genetically. So you can see that this kind of human settled inside the cave for a number of years and from different, probably stocks of population. So here we have notes on the morphology and the age of Tabon Cave, published in Current Anthropology, and then this one in Elsevier, the Upper Pleistocene Homo sapiens from Tabon, the Philippines, and their description and dating. So here's Anne-Marie Sema reconstructing the paleo environment or taking samples and found several species of plants, Nipa, Ciceria, and fern. And so it says something about the tropical environment in the Tabon Cave area and the changing population also between environment, plants and animals, and then humans. So we have this publication called Legacy of the Islands, reconstructing Tabon Cave, and several articles comparing Tabon to Indonesian materials. So we have also this publication, Insular Southeast Asia and the Lower Paleolithic, in the Encyclopedia of Global Archaeology. Holocene period between 11,000 years ago onwards is the Neolithic period in the Philippines about 4,500 years ago. So the origins of the present-day contemporary peoples in the Philippines and island Southeast Asia are these Austronesian population. The coming of the Austronesian-speaking populations were actually from mainland China about 6,000 years ago, and then moved to Taiwan around 5,000 years ago by long-distance sailing. They have the coastal settlement, top terrace settlement, and inland riverine settlement. The first settlement in Batanes, for example, Island, and Lalo, Cagayan Valley were about 4,500 years ago. This is the period of the expansion of Austronesian settlement. Settlements are probably beside big rocks and linto types, hamlet types of bahay kubo, small villages. And they still have small populations and estimated for a number of about 500 people or less, and not so nucleated but sparse settlement. So here is the map reconstructed by Bellwood, coming from China, Taiwan, the Philippines, and then across Micronesia, and then, of course, in the western part, Palawan, and then Vietnam, and then all the way down to Mindanao, and then Indonesia. They were sailing people, and probably they have the boats. They can build boats. They have the tools to do that, the ground edge tools, adses. And so it is always possible for them to do long distance sailing. And we have this Lapita voyage, an experimental voyage, which people can get through the internet and look at this. It was an experimental voyage from Bohol to the Pacific area in Anuta and Tikopia for about 3 months voyage, and with the bare double-hulled canoe and no engine, and just with the scrub sail that was used. And my colleague then is about 85 years old, but now he passed away. So between Batanes and then to the Philippines, several islands, so they can do island hopping. And people may have settled in Itbayat, and then of course Batan and Digay, Buhos, and Sabtang, and then all the way to Luzon, Nagsabaran, and Lalo, Magapit. I am actually presently in Lalo now doing excavation on the Neolithic Metal Age period in Katugan site. So this is the Neolithic site period in Itbayat. And we can see here our colleague from Indonesia doing some research also with us, Peter Bellwood, and found a number of these adzes. They are Neolithic materials found in Itbayat, in Torongan Cave. So here are the materials, different from pebble cobble tool. These are the top terrace settlement in Mahatao, and you look at this kind of present-day settlement. This is the Spanish period and contemporary settlement of the present-day Mahatao. Perhaps during the Neolithic period, around 4,000 years ago, this was still with water. This basin was still with water. This is Mahatao Patio now, Diyos Dipun. So we found settlement in the top terrace. That's why, and this is an uplifted coral, and now very deep settlement. So with rivers, so people stay on the top terrace because of the flooding or the rising sea level. And difficult for them sometimes to use the coastal area. That's why they have to move up. You know, there are some tsunamis and many other geological features or activities which affect settlement in the coastal area. That's why they may have decided to move up. So from the top terrace, we found this evidence of stone tools, probably used for deep sea fishing, and spindle whorl, one of the biggest, and they may have weaving, and of course a number of these adzes and pre-shaped adzes or stone tools turn into adzes for cultivation, horticulture. So pottery was developed during the Neolithic period, especially the circle stamp, red slip pottery during this period, and they were found up in the terrace. And then, of course, in some area, in the Balobok, we find some of these shell adzes, also like ground stone tools, adzes used to make boats for boat building. So during the Metal Age, you can see here, from about 500 BC to AD 1000, we have the changing settlement from the previous Neolithic period. The expanding population growth from about 500 to more than 1,000 people. So there were growths in villages, nucleated settlement, mainly in coastal and riverine areas. Because the environment became stable, they occupied again the coastal area. And also of their sailing activities and riverine areas, of course, they penetrate inland through rivers. And there were trade networks, inter-island trades, and long-distance trade that developed because they were very mobile and they can travel by boat in long distance. And the development of decorated potteries, suggesting also the development of social groupings and ethnicity during this period. So these are the evidences of the settlement. We have deep sea fishing gorges before the hook was developed and made of bone, mainly dog bone, in fact. And then sea urchin, and of course the development of carving, bone carving. So also evidence of settlement is the production of lingling-o made from jade or nephrite that were excavated inside the caves. And here are the Lingling-O, and this is how they make the Lingling-O. And so definitely suggest the kind of semi-permanent settlement during this period in the Metal Age. I am here now in Lalo, and this is the kind of site that we excavate, only that this is in Agsabaran. This is the Metal Age period, and this is Neolithic period. And you can see here post hole suggesting a bahay kubo or a house, and these are the kinds of artifacts that we're found. See post hole here and adses. So these are the late Neolithic settlement. And here, sometimes you have burials. Here, jar burials and with glass beads or stone beads, and then bone tool, and then decorated pottery for jar burials, dog burial, and house post. So people live in the shell midden because shell midden is like a drainage. So water keeps going down, and then they bury their dead under the house. Sometimes even animals, their pet animals. So this is just a comparative picture of the ancient dog, which is about 3,000 years ago, 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, and a present dog. So it's a big dog that they keep also during the late Neolithic Metal Age. So here, quite deep, late Adan Soriano, and then, of course, my colleague Peter Bellwood here. And here is again a hiatus between the Neolithic and the Metal Age. That is a post hole that you can see, suggesting a house on top of the shell midden. So here now, this is the area where we are excavating presently in Katugan, shell midden, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So there are burials in layer 3, near Metal Age burial. There is the burial that you can see inside the shell midden, human remains, and the adze was found here. So we can see the pattern between the Neolithic period, 4,500 years ago to 2,500 years ago, the development of settlement in this area of Cagayan Valley. And here is a map that you can see tracing all these shell midden along the Cagayan River. Both sides of the Cagayan River are shell middens. And there were also extended burials within the shell midden. So people bury their dead where they settled also. They did not have formal cemetery yet. So here from Cagayan, they went to the Marianas 2,500 years ago, 3,500 to Marianas, 1,500 BC. So here are the evidences of the similarities, Lalo artifacts, and the Marianas, and suggesting about the same Austronesian-speaking people traveling long distance. And of course, another Lapita pottery, very similar to those found in Lalo, Solomon Island. This is the book we published with Peter Bellwood and myself as the editor, 4,000 Years of Migration and Cultural Exchange, Archaeology of the Batanes Island, Northern Philippines. It's published in Australia, Australian National University Press. And of course, our very famous Manunggul jar, which may not really be Neolithic, but a Metal Age pottery because of its decorations and the elaborate anthropomorphic figure suggesting the ship of the dead, a culture that developed along the island Southeast Asian coast between Palawan and Indonesia. It was a jar burial, in fact. And the religion of the Ngaju, if you look at them, is very, very similar. The Ngaju religion is still an ethnographic group in Borneo. So here, a metal age population in Maitum, and of course, the development, as I mentioned before, ethnicity and the anthropomorphic figure suggesting a group that was separate from the others. And then after Maitum, you have 585 AD plus minus 85, the Salangsang jar burial. They still have the anthropomorphic pottery because Maitum went up to about 370 AD. So, but here are limestone stone covers, suggesting this is in the collection of the University or San Carlos University Museum, a number of these, suggesting also population density in Salansang Cave, Lebac. So we have collection there and a collection in Barcelona, the World Cultural Museum in Barcelona have a collection of those. These limestone burials, they are carved limestone burials instead of pottery, were found in Indonesia, and they're very similar to those found in Seleman Lebak, suggesting that people may have moved back and forth between the Philippines, southern Philippines, and then Indonesia, having this kind of very similar settlement. So they may have houses already, bahay kubo, suggesting because of the roof that were found or designed for this limestone. It's in Sulawesi, Warugas. So here is the distribution of the what they call now the megalithic remains in Southeast Asia, Thailand, and then we have from Taiwan, Philippines, and then Borneo here, and a number here in Sumatra, and then of course the island of Java, Indonesia, and then also in the Marianas you have in the Pacific in Rota Island you have the Taga stone, big limestone carvings used as houses. So here is a picture of the Gunung Padang. This is from my colleague, which suggests about 5,000 years ago settlement, and a number of these megalithic type of stones there. But and the plains of jars in Laos, northern Laos, also type of megalithic burials instead of jar, and suggesting also settlement of people in this area in mainland Southeast Asia. The only one also found in Asia. And they did some excavation and found also some jar burials and extended burials within the context of the plain of jars. And of course, in Batanes, this is Bidug Ijang, top terrace settlement, and we can see houses and surrounded by stones, which may have been natural but modified for this kind of environment. It's like a castle, in fact, and then you have terracing for vegetables or rice, and then you have these houses also before going up there and near the river. So this is the kind of settlement pattern that we see in the area. So this is the actual picture, and this is the representation of that, and this is the back view looking at the sea. So the river is passing across, surrounding this Ijang. See, it's from both sides. Another type is in the Ibuhos. So the settlement is uphill, of course, terrace, and the burial is a bit low and with the stone bow shape. So people live there and now they have more or less a formal cemetery with symbolic stone boat-shaped markers because of their maritime activities. The Vikings, by the way, have this kind of settlement as well, but it's a co-evolution. It's not a direct relationship between the Vikings and the people in Batanes. So here, you can see that when we excavated this stone boat shape, there was a flex burial below with pottery and some symbolic brain coral there. Same thing with this juvenile burial, small boat, but there was a juvenile about 5 to 7 years old, hydrocephalic, and put in a carved limestone formation instead of a jar. So and then they decorated it with this stone boat shape. So here's the team that we have: Peter Bellwood and some of the people now in the museum and at the School of Archaeology in UP. And Hong Xiaochun is now a Chinese archaeologist who had degrees in Australia, of course, of our own, who is now also in Australia doing rock art, Halandoni. And rock art suggesting of the maritime people sailing, and this is in Tagen site in Balut Island in Mindanao. So here are some of the distribution: Batanes, Bison in Vietnam, Hawin, Angkor, and then Manunggur, Tawi-Tawi, Butuan. So this is the sailing, long distance sailing activity where the Austronesian people get together or having a network, Borobudur and Prambanan, also in Indonesia and Sulawesi. So the distribution of this settlement, for example, in Sanui in Vietnam and Hoa Dien, Vietnam, Thailand, Central Philippines. You can see the big long distance relationship from the pottery. And here's also the Sawin Kalanay in the Philippines, from Batanes to Balut Island, Sarangani, Quezon, Palawan, El Nido, Calatagan, Novaliches, Kalanay, Masbate, Sorsogon, Bondok Peninsula, Bohol, Negros in Bacong. And here, also in Negros in Bacong, we have anthropomorphic potteries found in Bacong area, and also in the top terrace, mainly burials. We still look for the settlement where they are, but definitely we have evidences in some areas of this. So here, jar burials with two individuals inside, and then Nida Cuevas, and then Sandy Santiago excavating, exposing the complexity of the jar burial. So this suggests also the population there practice jar burials. And this is another one. It's a coffin burial instead of a jar. And then we have these anthropomorphic figures on the side and a number of potteries in various sizes, probably one on top of the other. So here, this is another area where you have also a similar settlement, and this is in Catanawan in Quezon province, and you have this very elaborated bone design for hilt of dagger. I think this is now exhibited at the National Museum. This was excavated by Dr. Victor Paz and his group from the UP and Australia. So relative dating is about 1,200 years ago. And these are the pottery and beads. So here in Kamhantik, Mulanay, the next town from Catanawan, we see evidence of this sarcophagus and post holes suggesting also houses within the context of burial. So an example of an Austronesian house from Sumatra is like this. So you can see here a number of posts which may have been documented by a post hole. This was in 1894. And then here, you can see here some of the post hole mark within the context of a coffin or a sarcophagus here. This is in Mulanay. So we can see top terrace settlement also from this site, even though it's about 10th century BC, 980 AD. So about 10th century, they still practice that kind of settlement during the context from the late Metal Age to the age of contact and trade. So here we can see this like a Belitung sample found there hidden within the context of the burial, and see some post holes also there. So this is in Kamhantik, Mulanay. So here, evidence well kept inside the burial. So Taiwan, they have Philippines, southern Indonesia, distribution of these kinds of burial tradition. Laos, Indonesia, of course, Java, and the Belitung Rek, Tang Dynasty, Changsaware. This is the one from Kamhantik side. And a number of them as trade goods. So you can see how this travels for long distance from southern China to Southeast Asia. So it's another evidence of the burial with post hole, and there is the burial inside. And some gold, suggesting also evidence of settlement. People live there with their own ornaments. Kalatagan, the same. They have burials and post holes. Kalatagan Pat, and some part with the death mask, a gold death mask. So people live where they people bury their dead where they live. So this is the age of contact from about 600 AD or CE. And you have the further expanding population in nucleated settlement pattern, long distance maritime trade, expansion of voluminous trade, centers, distribution, and redistribution. For example, in the Philippines, they can distribute only in the Manila area, and the goods are redistributed within the area. And then you have the development of towns and trading centers, urban centers, and satellite areas, creation of cities into more than 5,000 population. Perhaps during the time of the Spanish conquest of Manila by Legazpi in 1565, you have already a number of population in the area. So the both constructions and traditions was well developed within the islands. And then we have other examples from the archaeology in Porac. Hacienda Ramona, Gudal sites, 1939. And then it was owned by Warner, Barnes and Company. And then an extensive burial dating to the late Tang to Middle Sung, 10th century AD, same like in Mulanay, and a village site and less extensive burial area dating from the late Sung, 11th to 13th century, and a small village site dating to the late Ming period. So it's again on top of a plateau. This is the Dizon site in Porac, and this was also excavated by us in the National Museum and later on by the UP Archaeological Studies program at the time. So we have the coastal and highland settlement, riverine, and the highland settlement. So this is the pattern that we see in Southeast Asia, Philippines, and other parts of Indonesia and Thailand. So principal trade routes, now becoming more sophisticated and traveling in many different areas for the distribution of ceramics. Pandanan there, and the kind of boat that was a hybrid between the Chinese and Southeast Asian, and now with about 3 decks sailing, and more trade goods can be transported through this kind of vessel. So, of course, the age of contact and trade, 13th century, the Agusan image and Banton cloth are suggestive of the kind of settlement. Now with religion, Hindu-Buddhistic, suggesting also the increasing population in the Philippines. And of course, through underwater archaeology, we can look at the kind of boat, the design of boat that they use. And this one, you can look at the long distance maritime trade with this kind of shipwreck that was found in Zambales. So blue and white from the Ming period, and then in the historical period, the galleons, San Diego, and then some of the Japanese vessels, Chinese vessels coming to the Philippines, European vessels, and of course the materials from the historical period. We have coins, silver coins from San Diego, Islamic coin, Chinese coin, so very, very international. And then you have olive jars from Europe, and then of course silver mortar and pestle, and the native Filipino or Southeast Asian pottery, blue and white, and celadon. So another example that we have here I showed is the Cahokia. It is already in the New World, United States, just showing the kind of settlement pattern that they have along the river. This is from my colleague Mandy Mijares, lecturer. So Cahokia covers an area of about 5 square miles, and its peak more than 100 mounds were built in the area. So these are mound builders, and the biggest of this mound is the Monk Mounds, according to him. And the Monk Mounds have 5 hectares, 5-meter high, contains 4 terraces, and it's the biggest man-made structures in North Mexico. So we can just see about the same period around 14th, 13th century. People construct mounds and occupy high areas for their, and the mount cheaply burial with platform of 20,000 shell beads and around 1,000 arrowheads and evidence of human sacrifices. So the same pattern between the New World and the Old World we can observe and see here. For example, the development of walls suggesting the we and them attitude, or and then along the rivers, so secluding themselves with rituals and temples, and then the villages around the area. So material culture, we have boats, and then trade goods also, shells and coins. And historical period in the Philippines, Paway Church, the beginning of the Spanish, and then our historical period in Intramuros. I did some excavation here in Parian, and we can see here also before Intramuros we have Santa Ana and elaborate burials, and then in Intramuros, of course, very permanent structures and the growth of a city from one period to the next. So development of the walled city and structures inside Intramuros. So here's the late Father Galende, and this is San Agustin Church. And historical period in Batangas, we can see from the destruction of the eruption of Taal, and this is a church in Santa Teresita, Batangas, and this is San Nicolas. So settlement, you can see here, post hole, when we excavated what was inside the church, and our lady archaeologists when they were students at the time. And maraming salamat po sa uulitin na lang.
Thank you, Dr. Dizon, for a most interesting and really comprehensive presentation. Doc, good afternoon.
Good afternoon din po.
Doc, with your permission, we have generated quite a number of questions already. I'd like to begin the question and answer portion. Can we begin, Doc?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. For the first question, a question from home. How does the presence of tektites signal that there was hominid or homo settlements?
Well,
What activities or landscape features indicated that?
These are the like meteorite stone shower
Yes.
that was that happened between 1 million years ago to 800,000 years ago. And of course, they were from outer space, but they have limited distribution here in Southeast Asia and Australia, not much in the US, and in the old world, very minimal. So they are good indicators of chronology or this period that archaeologists have used. For example, even in China, they have dated tektites, uranium series, or some other elaborate new types of dating technique. And consistently, they fall into that period between 1 million and 800,000 years old. So their distribution would indicate also, or their presence in archaeological site will just be an indicator of the dates or chronology of the site.
Another question, Doc. Okay. Doc, what are the characteristics now of paleo environment, and what do these indicate for human settlements?
Well, environmental features of the site would indicate what kind of environment. Is it tropical, rainforest, or open savanna? And is it most likely that human will occupy? Does it have the characteristic or features that people can survive? For example, water. And does it have many mammals or animals and birds that they can hunt, because at the time they did not yet plant food staples, but rely much on hunting. Although there were indications that there were some like taro or vegetables or plants that can be consumed. That's why the paleo environment will indicate the kind of people selection for a settlement. And the environmental data is very, very important and critical in determining this availability for human consumption.
Okay, thank you, Doc. Moving on, Doc, from Alexis Sparks. Can these pre-colonial cultural artifacts be connected to our culture currently? Can we still see fragments of these old traditions in modern Philippine lifestyles? The relevance, I think, she's asking, can these cultural findings enrich Philippine culture now? Ano po yung implication ata for our times?
Some of them, we find continuity of the use of, for example, the technology of like planting or even making, manufacturing stone tools are still like the same in the present day society. Grinding, flaking, and everything else. So these are the remnants of an old technology, and stone tools are indicators of technology. They vary from one region to another, and there are general descriptions or identification in finding them. The same thing with the Neolithic, like the axes, ground stone tools, and later on they become metals. And up to the time when we have the asarol for agricultural technology. So yes, there are some primitive technology which may have continuity up to the present time.
Okay. Doc, as a follow-through question from the same person that made the inquiry, can this knowledge of settlement patterns in the Philippines be utilized or connected to the modern urban and rural planning and taking into consideration flooding patterns and the agricultural needs?
Yes, in some ways, although it's a different area. For example, in the development of cities, like in the Middle East, and then now we have city planning. Before, we did not plan what Manila would look like. It just grow and grow and grow. So there is flooding, and because Manila is a swampy area, and the canal system were all blocked, and ito yung mga stero. So it's also our own fault. We did not study our environment. We did not study the culture that is living into it. Mabuti nga ngayon yung dito sa may bandang global city, there are new plannings na they're prepared for flooding. So with that, you can see now that is human culture, or development of technology applied to the environment. So ito yung wala natin. But if you look at even medieval cities, medieval castles, na-abandon because also of poor drainage. Wala sila. And population grow, so nagkakaroon sila ng inhygienic environment.
Yes. Okay.
Kasi doon sila dumudumi, ganon.
Yes.
And it creates like many bacteria, cholera.
The Black Plague
then,
was
and the people suffer. So doon nagkakaroon ng annihilation of the population. So they are abandoned and then magkukolapse. So dito, we don't really know, for example, but we know that Metro Manila is a swampy area, bulubundukin. The way I presented, like Cagayan Valley, now it's an open field, rolling hills. So I would imagine ganun ang Metro Manila doon kasi may LFAs din tayo sa Antipolo, Guadalupe, Cubao, and Quezon City, Makati. And walang nag-record ng landscape, yung very, very minimal, yung old photographs. For example, yung mga nakikita ko sa Facebook ngayon, what old Makati would look like, ganito. Old Manila, old Ermita, like this. Pero may bahay na. And when the Spaniards came, marami ng populasyon. So, hindi na-contain yung population at yung iba nga, like Easter Island, nagkaroon ng depletion yung environment. Kasi yung carrying capacity of the environment was not enough for the population to be there. Kaya nagko-collapse, nawawala yung populasyon because of that. So dito naman, dahil maraming resources sa Metro Manila, hindi pa naman ganon. But you see also that Manila is sinking because, again, yung foundation niya is swamp. So very important ang geological foundation ng mga cities. Kaya nga, they select where like castles or palaces or citadels will be located at gagawin ng mga ancient people.
Doc, would you say that the prehistoric settlers did they practice a certain degree of planning or forecasting before they undertook to build their settlements, to establish their settlements?
It was known like the hunter-gathering population, yung mga Paleolithic, They practice even birth control to control their population because they were mobile people. Palakad-lakad lang sila. They cannot keep many children as they can. So one lang, tapos yung lifespan nila hindi naman gaanong tumatanda. Mainly siguro 30 years old, and then they die. So later on, nag-improve naman yung diet because of the diet. Ano kasi yan symbiotic lahat yan development ng technology, agricultural technology, nagkaroon ng permanent settlement yung mga farmers. So hindi na sila kumikilos. So kinakain rice and wheat, and then tumataba at dumadami yung anak. So lumalaki yung populasyon. So yan yung mga factors na nakikita where this kind of people will settle. Pag nag-over populate sila, mag-conquest naman or locate, relocate, mag-colonize ng ibang location, ng ibang site. Kaya ganun, expanding population, whether in coastal area, riverine areas, or up in the mountains. So later on, kasi nag-stabilize din ang environment, nawala na yung mga tsunami, nawala na yung bumababa ang sea level, kaya nasa coastal areas karamihan yung mga tao.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Doc, I'd like to give way for this cute question. It's Johan Maddox from Homeschool Journey. I can imagine he's juvenile. Do people still bury their dogs to this day? As a matter of tradition.
Yeah, I think yung mga pet lovers, they have their own cemetery. Sometimes it's within the context of the parents. Like I have a niece who has the dog buried side by side with the parents. So dog lovers sometimes provide or have their dog burials in the cemetery.
Okay. Doc, another question from Mark Maslar. Am I reading this correct? Yeah. He's an independent film researcher studying northern Filipino tribes.
Okay.
Ethno-linguistic groups. Do you subscribe to the Austronesian theory that northern indigenous Filipino tribes, again, come from ancestors who migrated south from Taiwan and continued southward? What resources do you recommend for studying the migration patterns of the northern Filipino tribes na naman? Okay. Ethno-linguistic groups.
There are many ethno or linguistic researches by Robert Blast and some Australian researchers have good research regarding this distribution. And before it's called Malayo-Polynesian until it became Austronesian speakers. So Robert Blast is one of the foremost linguistic person whom I can recommend to read. Ross, I think the other one is Ross, R-O-S-S. They're very available. I think anthropological linguistics have them in their references most of the time.
Okay. Mark, I hope you're getting this. Another question from Hermel Pama, UP Anthro and UST. Thank you, Dr. Dizon, for the lecture. Considering the big body of archaeological data in the Philippines, are there any attempts for a focused comparative study vis-a-vis other other Southeast Asian contexts? I think specifically of the rich context that Sangiran, Central Java could offer, considering that its caldera provides geological certification across a long evolutionary time period.
Yeah, the Indonesians have been very prolific in the study of the Sangiran Dome. And, it's the reverse of the Sangiran Dome to the Kalinga site. Yung Kalinga, it's a basin. It's a folding. And Sangiran Dome is from the top. It's collapsing. So we made some comparative studies, or there are comparative studies that one can look at this. In fact, see and ask like the formations of the site and the availability of the megafauna, both Indonesia and Philippines.
Okay. Doc, another question from home. Apart from rock art, what else can be found on Balut Island?
Balut Island, there are some Austronesian pottery sherds I found in Balut Island. So uh, 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 these are the materials I can remember regarding Balut Island. And well, it's a very small island, and so there is not much to see. But of course, there's evidence of Austronesian pottery sherds are available in Balut Island.
Okay. Doc, another question from Erwin Benaventura. Is
Oo.
there a discernible pattern in building houses in communities, or are these arbitrary or organic? Are these found in informal settlements in the current urban areas?
Of course, there are patterns of culture. People follow the kind of cultural pattern that they have according to their environment. For example, yung availability ng bahay kubo, mainly dito lang yan sa tropical Southeast Asia, but not elsewhere. And you see the different kinds of houses. For example, in Batanes, stone houses. And bahay kubo has never been very popular masyado doon. So people with their culture just follow what was in there. So ganun ang nakikita ko. And even in Indonesia, you can look at how houses were built. Thailand, ganun din. May mga post hole lahat. And then some are really elevated because of flooding. And some animals are kept under the houses. Like sa Thailand, may mga elephant sila. So you can see that's why you have a very tall or mas mataas yung kanilang parang ceiling compared dito. Yung mga bahay kubo dito kasi mga manok lang at saka bibe, kambing or baboy, makikita mo na mabababa. And you go to Ifugao, nakita mo nasa labas ng kanilang bahay, doon sa barandilas yung mga alaga nilang baboy, mga extra food, diretso na doon sa mga animals. So may patterns of culture yung mga tao na sinusunod nila ang kanilang houses and settlement, nag-extend lang sila.
Okay. Doc, another question from home. You mentioned that there were tigers in Palawan.
Yes.
Were actual remains found?
Yes, of course. There are fossils of tiger that were excavated in El Nido, northern Palawan.
El Nido. Okay.
El Nido, yeah. At Ile Cave. These were in the Archaeological Studies program under Dr. Victor Paz.
Okay. Doc, you mentioned earlier that it was very exciting for the Philippines to have found, halimbawa, the newest Homo species. And further with the other discoveries, this put us in the map as a site for evolutionary and prehistory research.
Yeah.
Doc, what does that mean to be targeted or identified or cited as an area for evolutionary research?
It's a very significant part of the whole research on human evolution. And before people look at Southeast Asia, the Philippines as a backwater, wala kang makikita dyan. Walang nangyari dyan. So now with the findings of the biglang nag-iba yung mundo ng tao. Dito pala nag-i-evolve. There is a new research that looks at the transmission of the genes like Denisovan, Homo erectus. So ngayon, with the new genetic research, nagiging active sila to look at and include Philippine materials in their research. Like even remains of Negrito o yung mga Mamanwa or any other Austronesian population. So naging super active in fact ang participation ng Philippine data or materials for worldwide research, especially human evolution.
Doc, how is this good for the Philippines? How is this good for the academic community?
Well, we are very, very proud that we are now mentioned. Unlike before, hindi nga tayo na may mention, and then
Okay.
we were treated like nothing. Bypass lang tayo. So ngayon, naging significant, like even Homo floresiensis sa Indonesia and this Homo lusinensis, they are the only species that are very, very small compared with the rest of the population ng Homo, African population. Well, aside from Taung, of course, Africanus, that's too early, 2-3 million years ago. And this one, even on a later date, you still have those remnants of primitive characteristics or features as a part of the human evolution. So yun ang very, very significant. Bakit nandito? And hanggang ngayon, people still debate and have to do a lot of research. That's why naging very active sila to do collaborative work with Filipino scientists now, both sa National Museum, but more now at the School of Archaeology sa UP, because there are more student researchers and even faculty researchers that are doing work there.
Okay. Doc, I'd like to spend time also again to go back to a question by homeschool journalist Johan Maddox.
Okay.
He was the one who mentioned the dog burial earlier. His question goes further. What kind of society were they during the Paleo period? He asks, he wonders, he questions, were they more capitalist or were they more communist? Yeah.
No, there was nothing like that. They were coming from hunter-gatherers and they become pastoralists or horticulturalists before the beginning of massive agriculture. So they have their own houses and pets, and dogs are very well taken care of, both for hunting and friends guard at the house. So they really keep these pets with them.
Look, I think the question begs another question, a similar question. Was there a semblance of governance in these societies, and how would you describe if such a phenomenon exists?
Well, it's very difficult to say that they are tribal societies because it's a derogatory term to have tribal. But I think now they may have some chiefs or a little bit of chiefdom, which may have influence regarding their own settlement. That's why they are kept together. So they should have their own protection under the leadership of an old man or whoever is respected in that society. But the form of governance, we don't have any evidence of that yet. So just more of an anthropological comparison regarding this kind of societies. No documents, no artifacts suggesting like in the Middle East, you have written sources to show that you have kings and you have a kingdom and you have a settlement and you have a social organization that is really hierarchical. But in the Philippines, we don't have that evidence. But for sure, they may have the social organization, not comparative to the kingly societies, but chiefly societies.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Doc, we have some more questions coming in just now. Again, from Elwin Benaventura. Are there superstitions followed in the building, particularly of the houses, their orientation?
This is common in Southeast Asia and it got lost in the Philippines. Now, for example, they provide offerings to avoid natural evil spirit when they build houses. Kaya they build the small houses first before the big ones. If you go to Thailand, to Indonesia, you can still see the spirit houses, but not anymore in the Philippines. When we were Christianized, this is totally eradicated. So wala nang ganon. But of course, the Chinese may mga feng shui na pinapollow. And again, that is cultural, if not religious. So yung mga dito, observation on early Philippine cultures, hindi natin masyadong na-record yon. They may have been present, but who knows now?
Okay. Doc, by Jem Jorbina. Good afternoon, Doc. Thank you for the lecture. His question is, aside from dogs, did they have any other pets as well?
We don't have much evidence of different pets. Of course, Indonesia have macaca monkeys a part of their burial in Songteru's very early cave. And but it was in a burial, so I suppose it did not die alone, the monkey, and it was provided with some artifacts. In the Philippines, this is the only one, dogs, although there were dogs in Santa Ana burial, I think also, or excavation. I don't see much animal remains in burials. Egyptians have cats, even mummified, but we don't have good evidence of cat yet in the Philippines. Only dogs.
Doc, I'm just curious. What are the attributes? What are the characteristics which led you to the conclusion that indeed the dogs that were found in the sites were pets rather than, say, predators or food that they would readily consume?
It was really in the context of burial. That's how you can identify and put some kind of characteristic to look at this. Unlike dogs are butchered, and as I told you before also, some artifacts found in Batanes were made of dog bones, like the gores, which is before the fishing hook was developed. We have the gores, it's like a needle, and that was made of dog. And some animal remains found in like middens, dogs, you have cut marks. Mainly they have also deer, but you know, they may not have been taken as pets. You can look at some of the antlers made into artifacts, for example, from deer. So it depends on the context. In the context of a dog burial, what can you say? People did not eat it anyway.
Yes.
So, and it was a complete dog found in this habitation site. So it was something else. And it's very rare. You don't see it often in many other excavation.
Okay. Doc, a couple of last questions before we conclude. You gave a very comprehensive survey of the dig sites and sites where evolutionary researches have been undertaken in the Philippines. Um, I would like to ask, are we looking at more areas for archaeological investigations in the near future? Um, uh, have we exhausted the archaeological sites, or are we looking at more sites that will be opened up in the future?
Of course, we have not exhausted the archaeological sites, and it depends on the program of the archaeology in the Philippines. And I'm happy that the School of Archaeology has been very active in proposing new archaeological research. And there are still many, many sites to be discovered and to be analyzed. And even from the old ones, old sites can be reworked, like Kalaw, when the first time
Rework.
we excavated it in 1980s. I was still there, and we were only up to the porcelain layer, and that's it. And we did not know that there may be earlier materials until Peter Bellwood and me were doing some visitation again and exploring Kalaw. And he thought that if we dig deep, even before Monday, there may be something because uh, in Flores, that was the same case. It was excavated before, and they found the Homo floresiensis until Morwood uh, broke that kind of tradition of excavating 2 meters below, and he went down very, very deep. And Mandy was inspired, so he followed suit and found this new fossil. So many, many sites have to be reworked, in fact. Tabon, for example, uh, we recovered more fossils than Robert Fox. And now we know that there are many population, changing population inside Tabon. Hmm.
Look, a final question. Any message for the viewers of Muscat? As a parting word, would you like to invite people to become archaeologists, considering that I think we have a fairly young crowd watching us this afternoon?
Of course, Muscat is a very critical organization now, very active in having lectures like this. And I'm happy to be invited and provide inspiration or this kind of uh, uh, intention for young people to do more archaeology. And even Muscat has a lot of artifacts to analyze, in fact. And I think it's a good thing that you have this kind of formal organization now, actively working with people. And so I'm happy that Muscat is doing this very well.
Thank you, Doc, for answering our questions. I'd like to turn the virtual floor over to Miss Cora for the concluding remarks. Thank you, Doc. Good
You're
afternoon.
welcome.
Yes.
Okay.
Cora.
Thank you also. Thank you also for the long lecture. It's supposed to be for one semester.
Thank you, Dr. Dizon Bong. Pero pahabol, isang question. Yes or no lang naman. Pahabol sa dogs pa rin. Did dogs come with the neolithic movement from Taiwan?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
thank you, Bong. As usual, Muscat and our viewers truly appreciate that chock full of information. Kahapon may tumawag na telling us exactly what you said, that they appreciate that we present interesting and educative information, but it's only thanks to you, thanks to my friends who are scholars and scientists who indulge Muscat its invitations. Not needed to reply to this, but just to think, have you consolidated, written, and drawn a map of these patterns, the ones that you lecture on, at least for the Philippine context, for habitation, burial, workshops for tools or weapons, trade routes? Maganda yung publication. Anyway, in some of the examples you showed, human settlements, including burial sites that were under the houses, were on stilts, no? And this practice had what you refer to as continuity. It persisted
at least till the early years of the previous century, for instance, among certain Cordillera populations, and certain patterns of settlements, such as coastal, riverine, and highland have also continued. You really make us realize all of these things that are in the backs of our minds, but we have to acknowledge all of these if only we to pay attention to city planning or urban planning or any kind of planning for habitation. During the Hispanic period, the pattern of center of town clustered around church, what is now referred to as the Plaza Complex, was added to the landscape, another kind of pattern. So you see, you bring out this kind of thinking in us. And so that is why we appreciate engaging you as our speaker. Thank you for your usual enlightening talk. And as you said, sa uulitin ha. I hope that we can invite you again to share your extensive and interesting kaalaman and experiences drawn from your archaeological explorations, excavations, and analytical work. To our friends, participants, and followers, thank you for starting with us Muscat's 2023 lecture series. We hope to see you next month as another archaeologist, a former colleague of Dr. Dizon, Ms. Nida Cuevas of the National Museum, will tell us of the gender aspects of the discovery of Dr. Dizon, the Maitum jars. Meanwhile, online, Muscat has revived its Wednesday post entitled Chiefly Goods. Muscat continues to celebrate Philippine culture, and we invite you to join us. Please go to our Facebook page for announcements and follow and like us on our new Instagram account and our usual YouTube and Spotify. So, Dr. Dizon, maraming salamat. Please let me know when we can have coffee. Keep safe and well. And to everybody, till soon. Magandang hapon po sa kanilang lahat.
Maraming salamat din po sa inyo.